the lies of entire empires, and his words echo across decades as warnings for the future. George Orwell was not just an author. He was a man who lived through war, poverty, injustice, and political deception and transformed all of it into timeless stories that still shake our understanding of freedom and truth today. His journey is not only about books like 1984 or Animal Farm, but about the courage to face uncomfortable realities and to speak against powerful systems, no matter the cost. This is the story of a boy who felt like an outsider, a soldier of words who exposed tyranny, and a thinker whose voice continues to shape the world we live in. Eric Arthur Blair, later known to the world as George Orwell, was born in 1903 in Motihari, India, during the height of the British Empire. His father worked as a colonial officer, while his mother carried the quiet burden of raising children far from the heart of England. Orwell's early years were marked by contradiction. Though technically part of the ruling elite, his family lived modestly, closer to lower middle class than aristocracy. This tension between appearance and reality would become one of the most defining themes of his life. When Eric was still young, his family moved back to England. There, the contrast between privilege and struggle became even sharper. He attended prestigious schools, yet always felt like an outsider. Surrounded by boys from wealthy backgrounds, he was painfully aware that his own family lacked the same comfort and fortune. The young boy carried this sense of not belonging like a shadow, and it grew into an acute sensitivity to social injustice. Books became his refuge. In stories, he found not only escape, but also mirrors of human cruelty and resilience. He read voraciously, training his imagination and sharpening his critical eye. Teachers noticed his brilliance, but they also noted his quiet defiance. He did not simply absorb knowledge, he questioned it. Already in childhood, Orwell was preparing for the role destiny would assign him, the role of a writer who would strip away illusions, confront uncomfortable truths, and expose the structures of power that shaped human lives. As Orwell grew into adolescence, he entered some of the most elite schools in England. Among them was Eton College, a place reserved for sons of aristocrats, future politicians, and those destined to inherit power. Yet, in the middle of all this privilege, Eric Blair once again stood apart. He was bright, yes, but he did not fit the mold of wealth and entitlement. He was the boy from a family of limited means. Carrying the burden of social hierarchy in every interaction, this outsider status did not defeat him, it shaped him. At Eton, Orwell developed a habit of observing more than he spoke. He analyzed the arrogance of privilege, the way authority worked, and the subtle cruelties of social stratification. It was here that he began to sharpen his pen, experimenting with essays, short stories, and reflections that carried a tone of rebellion. Teachers noted his originality, though some dismissed him as eccentric. But in those writings, seeds of the great novelist were quietly taking root. Instead of following the expected path, university at Oxford or Cambridge, and a stable career, Orwell chose something unexpected. At the age of 19, he joined the Imperial Police in Burma, one of Britain's colonies in Asia. It was a decision that reflected his complex relationship with authority. He did not admire power, yet he sought to understand it from the inside. In Burma, Orwell confronted the brutal reality of colonialism. He saw firsthand how one nation's rule could strip another of dignity, how men in uniform enforced silence, and how fear dictated daily life. The young officer felt increasingly tormented, not by the people he was supposed to police, but by the very system he represented. In time, the guilt became unbearable. He realized he was not made to serve power, but to question it. Returning to England, he carried a heavy truth. The empire he grew up respecting was built not only on pride, but on oppression. This awakening left scars, but also gave him the raw material for his writing. He had lived inside the machine of power, and it would haunt him forever. When Orwell left the police service and returned to England, he faced a new challenge: how to live as a writer. He chose a path few of his peers would dare to follow. Instead of chasing comfort or stability, Orwell immersed himself in poverty. He lived in cheap boarding houses, worked as a dishwasher in Paris, and wandered through the poorest neighborhoods of London. Some saw recklessness in his choices, but for Orwell, it was a deliberate pursuit of truth. To understand society, he believed he had to live it in its rawest form. He wanted to write not from the safety of privilege, but from the ground where life was harsh and unforgiving. This experience gave birth to his first major book, Down and Out in Paris and London. Written under the pen name George Orwell, the work was both a memoir and a testimony. It revealed the hidden world of the poor, the forgotten men and women who lived on society's margins. For the first time, Orwell gave them a voice. The book did not bring him wealth, but it gave him purpose. He discovered the power of words to unveil what most people preferred to ignore. Still, the life of a writer was far from easy. Rejections came often, and poverty continued to follow him. Yet, in these struggles, Orwell shaped his resilience. He was not writing for fame, he was writing for truth. And slowly, his name began to circulate among intellectuals who saw in his work something authentic and uncompromising. This stage of his life taught Orwell something essential. Literature was not a luxury. It was a weapon, a mirror, a light in the darkness. He had found his mission, and he would not abandon it. In the 1930s, Europe was on fire. Fascism was spreading in Italy and Germany, and Spain descended into civil war. For Orwell, this was not just distant news, it was a call to action. He traveled to Spain to fight on the Republican side against Franco's dictatorship. What he encountered would mark him for life. At first, he felt inspired by the idealism of the soldiers, men and women who fought for freedom and justice. But soon he discovered a darker reality. The Republican side was not united. Rival factions turned against each other, suspicion spread, and propaganda replaced truth. Orwell himself was wounded by a sniper's bullet, nearly losing his life. His experience in Spain gave birth to Homage to Catalonia, a book that stood apart from both right-wing and left-wing propaganda. Orwell dared to tell the truth, that war is never as pure as slogans suggest, and that even causes labeled as just can be corrupted by power struggles. His honesty was controversial. Some accused him of betrayal, but Orwell refused to bend. He believed that telling the truth even when it hurt one's own side was the highest duty of a writer. Spain gave Orwell something else, the clarity that authoritarianism comes in many disguises. Whether wearing the mask of fascism or communism, its essence was the same: control, manipulation, and the silencing of free thought. This realization would guide him toward the books that would define his legacy. After the war, Orwell returned to England with a sense of urgency. The world was drifting toward another catastrophe, and he wanted to speak before it was too late. In 1945, he published Animal Farm, a short novel that used animals on a farm to tell one of the most powerful political allegories of the 20th century. On the surface, it was a fable about pigs, horses, and chickens. But underneath, it was a searing critique of totalitarianism. Orwell revealed how revolutions can betray themselves, how leaders who rise promising equality can become the very tyrants they once overthrew. The pigs who declared all animals are equal soon revised the commandment into something chilling. But some animals are more equal than others. The book was banned in several countries, attacked by both left and right, but it also captivated readers around the world. For many, it was the first time they saw politics stripped down to its raw mechanisms of power and corruption. Orwell had found the perfect balance, simple enough to be understood by anyone, yet profound enough to expose truths that others feared to say. Animal Farm established Orwell as more than a writer. He was now a prophet of political clarity, a man who could decode the games of power for ordinary people. But his greatest work was still to come. In 1949, Orwell released the book that would forever etch his name into history, 1984. It was not just a novel, it was a warning, a prophecy, a mirror of the dangers he had witnessed throughout his life. Set in a dystopian future, the book described a society under constant surveillance, where the party controlled not only actions, but thoughts. Big Brother is watching you. These words became the defining symbol of Orwell's vision. In his story, truth itself was manipulated. History was rewritten daily. Language was reduced to control thought, and fear ensured obedience. The protagonist, Winston Smith, struggled to hold on to his humanity in a world where freedom had been erased. 1984 was born from Orwell's deepest fears and hardest lessons. That tyranny does not always come with chains or weapons, it comes with lies, manipulation, and the erosion of truth. His own declining health added urgency to his writing. He was battling tuberculosis, coughing blood as he typed. Yet he pushed forward, determined to finish before his time ran out. The book shocked the world. Some dismissed it as pessimism. Others recognized its brilliance. Decades later, 1984 remains one of the most quoted, most relevant, and most chilling works ever written. Orwell had captured not just his century, but every century. Orwell did not live long after the publication of 1984. His health deteriorated rapidly, and in January 1950, at only 46 years old, he died in a London hospital. Yet, though his life was short, his impact was immeasurable. In just a few decades, Orwell transformed from an insecure boy on the margins of privilege into one of the most influential thinkers of modern history. His works became not only literature, but warnings, guideposts, and rallying cries. He gave words to fears people could not express, and in doing so, he gave them the courage to resist. Today, Orwell's warnings about surveillance, manipulation, and authoritarianism feel as urgent as ever. Every time a government seeks to rewrite truth, every time propaganda distorts reality, every time freedom is threatened, the voice of Orwell echoes. He reminds us that truth matters, that freedom matters, that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Orwell's legacy is not just in his books, it is in every conversation where truth is defended, in every society that questions authority, and in every individual who dares to think freely. George Orwell's life was not one of comfort or wealth. It was a life of struggle, illness, and constant confrontation with uncomfortable truths. But from these struggles came a voice so powerful that it continues to guide humanity more than 70 years after his death. His lesson is simple, yet profound. Words matter, truth matters, and the courage to speak them can shape the future. From the alleys of Paris to the battlefields of Spain, from the farms of fables to the grim visions of dystopia, Orwell left us a legacy of clarity and resistance. He showed us that tyranny begins with lies, and freedom begins with honesty. And he proved that even one voice, armed only with a pen, can challenge the mightiest systems. As you reflect on Orwell's journey, ask yourself, in a world filled with noise, manipulation, and distraction, are we willing to defend truth the way he did? His story is not only about the past, it is about us, here and now. If Orwell's life inspired you today, share in the comments where you are watching from and what part of his story touched you the most. Let us continue this conversation, because every act of remembering Orwell is an act of keeping truth alive.